I'd like you to maybe share and explain a little bit how did you realize that these BDSM practices at an unconscious level suggested that you didn't feel deserving of love or of validation and you deserved actually to be punished? And what could have created that belief in you at a subliminal level?
It was a position of self-awareness after the event. At the time, I couldn't have told you so clearly that I am practicing this BDSM because I have a lack of self-love. In fact, something very delusional was going on instead. Um, as humans, if we have this disconnect, this internal disconnect, whatever it is, and in my case, it was a lack of self-love. I loved myself as a friend, as a family member, as an office colleague. I didn't love myself as a lesbian woman. This disconnect over my sexuality was manifesting itself in adult life by self-sabotaging me. So putting me in stupid situations, relationships that were toxic, dysfunctional. And at the time, I wasn't present and aware that that's what was happening. But what happens is that BDSM had just made the perfect framework for me to get the punishment that I felt I deserved at a psychological cellular level. And I drew that into me. But it was my self-sabotaging subconscious that deluded me to think that I should stay in this relationship. And I deceived myself into thinking that I was on a mission to save this woman from her demons, and that one day we would have this amazing session where I effectively exorcised her, exorcised as an
Yes,
exorcism,
yes, yes.
and brought out her demon. And in the one of the last scenes of the book, I go to a session with her. And I've painted a red cross on my chest because I think I'm going to be. I've taken some holy water. I've stolen some holy water from the church because I think I'm going into a session with her to exorcise her demons. And it's this delusion that was bound up in my faith and my love, and I thought I was on this mission to save her. And we can't save other people. We can only save ourselves. We might help people and give them signposts, but the only person who can save that person is themselves. And I had deluded myself, which meant I couldn't get out of this relationship because I convinced myself it was my mission to save her. And I had to take all this torture and all this pain and take it away from her so that I could save her. And that was a very noble pursuit. And the love that I put into it was amazing. But I was on a wrong course because I was deluding myself to stay chained to this relationship. And the self-awareness all comes after the relationship finishes. And in some ways, writing the book was part of the cathartic process. But there was a period of about 6 months after the relationship finished, and I ended it with her because I finally came to the realization that I had to get out of the relationship. But in the last 6 months of the relationship with her, I was starting to see and starting to get messages that I needed to recognize myself and I needed to learn to love myself. And there were some therapists I was talking to, and I was getting ideas from church. And this gradual process of starting to love myself started to happen during the last 6 months of the relationship. And it was as if God had to strip me down from everything. I had my financial stability, my freedom, my self-esteem, all of it was stripped away. And I was at this really dark place. And I had to lift myself up by my own bootstraps. And I did start to manage doing that. And eventually I saw the light and realized I had to finish the relationship. And I left her. It took me the best part of 2 years to get over her after splitting up with her. It took her about a month, perhaps less. But during that time, I had some amazing dreams. Again, there's one of these dreams I describe in the book where I'm looking in the mirror, saying to myself, Elizabeth, I love you. I love everything you stand for. Elizabeth, I love you. I love everything about you. I love everything you stand for. And this face peeled off me. And then I saw the real inner child, which incidentally looked like a surfer. But that was, and I was seeing myself, and in that dream was symbolic of the change I was going through. So it was very much being forced to reckon with the dark place that I was in and find my own strength to bring myself out of it. And again, I think it was part of the love that I'd put into every situation that I was confronted with, but that came back to me. So that's sort of, but it took a while to get to that point where I could say this is what was happening in that relationship. I couldn't see it when I was in the thick of it, but I could see it looking back on it retrospectively very clearly.
So interesting. Would you say that the love you felt for Tomo was a delusion itself? How would you look back at that now?
No, I still love her in a part of me. The love I had for her, I don't think it was real love, unconditional love. Well, I think unconditional love is kind of reserved for parents to children, really. It's very difficult to do horizontal unconditional love, but I know I did love her, but it was more an infatuation kind of love. It was more an emotional love, and the love that I have for my current partner is completely different. Things really changed after that relationship because I noticed that I wasn't drawing in, I wasn't becoming attracted to the same kind of girls who would always lead me on, and in fact they were straight, and it just stopped. All of that stopped happening, and I stopped getting emotional. In my relationship, during my book, I talk about this. I did actually a past life regression, and I just kept an open mind. I don't know what I think about past life regressions, but I just keep an open mind. But I went with a Japanese bilingual life regression therapist, and she took me back to a time, medieval time, and I was in Eastern Europe, and I was lighting the pyre under the stakes of witches who were being burned, and that was my job, and I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed watching the witches burn, and that was a past life regression. And whether or not you want to believe it, something that happened that was for real was that in reliving that experience, sort of in a slightly hypnotic state, I released so much buried emotion from my soul and spirit. It was an incredibly relieving process. And I think that actually peeled away a lot of the issues that I had, that I'd had along because of my sexuality. I'd built up all this emotion and hurt. And whether or not it was a cellular memory from a past life, or whether it was built up in this current life, I shed a huge amount of that after doing this regression therapy. And it was from that point that things really started to change. So I think that the relationship helped me get to a point where I would seek to resolve myself. But certainly in the last 6 months of that relationship, I started to really love myself and see the light.
So beautiful. I see it like a return back to the self, like a reconnection with the self. After loving another and expecting the other to show up, to be there for you, to treat you in a way or another, to validate you and whatever. And you also mentioned that by learning to love yourself, it put an end to the sadomasochistic tendencies or practices. Do you really feel there is a connection between these two? Because I'm thinking that may be an universal truth. So other people that struggle with
Right.
with
Yeah.
themselves might find a bit of soothing in that.
So in my case, and this is so BDSM is multifaceted, and everybody who is practicing BDSM have their own very unique story and unique fetishes and interests. In my case, I don't want to be whipped. I don't want that pain anymore. I wouldn't go back there. Sure, I'd love to be tied up, but that's because bondage turns me on, and I need it much less these days. But I'm 52 now, so I've moved on. The other things are more important in my life. But I absolutely have no interest and no attraction to going back to a mentally or physically torturous relationship, albeit consensual. I just don't want to go there because I never liked pain. I entered into it to please her because that was my quintessential expression of love, this love and this infatuation I was talking about earlier. Whereas now the way I love is totally different. It's much more a companionship love. You just want them to be happy. Whereas that wasn't where I was with Tomo.
Yeah.
And so is it a universal truth? No, I don't think it is, because for me, getting out of a sadistic, sadomasochistic relationship was because I didn't need to be whipped anymore, because I don't feel that guilt anymore. But if somebody is in a sadomasochistic relationship, it could be psychologically that they feel they should be punished. And it probably is many practitioners of BDSM probably have some internal issues that they're playing out on the surface through BDSM, and it provides a perfect framework for that. But there's a huge number of people who are practicing sadomasochism because that is what turns them on. And it's the pain that turns them on, and it's an incredible, deep sexual interaction with their partner. And they love themselves very much, but they're just turned on by pain. Yeah.
Okay.
They're just turned on. Sorry, my mic went up. So they love themselves very much, and they're just turned on by pain. And so they don't need to leave that relationship.
I get it. So how would people know whereabouts they fall, in what category? How do they know if they actually do it because they want to punish themselves unconsciously, or they do it because this is them, this is how they feel excited with being in a sexual act, or whatever happens there? How would people know from your experience?
I didn't know. I didn't know until things got ridiculous, and I had to start scratching my head and started talking to therapists. So
you have made it with therapists? Sorry for this, to intervene. Would you have would you have realized whatever you realized about yourself and your tendencies without the support of therapy? Would you have realized that on your own, or you needed support from outside to help you go inside and within yourself and find out those truths?
It's hard to say. I think the therapists really helped me. Would I have made those observations on my own? I'm not sure that I would. I think I had one therapist who just said to me one day, you've got to find that recognition in yourself. You had to find the recognition in yourself. Stop relying on it. Stop relying on Tomo to give you recognition, because she won't. You've got to find it in yourself. And I think so. It wasn't just therapy. I mean, I was reading books, and one day I was sitting down watching a video on the internet that just happened to come up, and it was I can't remember the name. It was an American anchor and a lady who'd had problems with obesity, and she had been berated and abused and trolled because of her body weight. And she was on this video just saying to all of you out there who are feeling bad because of your color, your shape, your size, your sexuality, your gender, whatever it is, don't let anybody else tell you that there's anything wrong with you. And words along that lines. And I just watched this video that just popped up on my YouTube channel one day, on YouTube one day.
What did you feel when you heard?
And I burst into tears. I thought, this is it.
It felt like
it spoke to me. It was just this was exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. And so I think this happens to all of us. When we're open, when we're seeking, when we're trying to understand what's going on, you read things, you see things, you hear things. I mean, I was still going to church in those days. The stuff was coming to me in the sermons. My friends so your friends become your psychotherapist. So could I have made it without the therapist? I think I saw 3 different therapists during that time. One was in Japan, one was in Dubai, one was in London, and it would depend on where I was. Could I have managed without them? Probably. It might have taken a bit longer. I think they were tremendous help in helping steer me in the right direction.
Yes.
So yeah, but you have to be open to it. You've got to say, okay, there's a problem. I need to solve this problem, and you have to be open to that. And sometimes we find a problem. We say, okay, I know there's a problem, but I'm just going to put it on the shelf because I can't do anything about it now, and that's fine. And then when the time is ready, you'll get it off the shelf. You say, okay, now I'm going to go and talk to somebody about this. So I think therapy can be tremendously helpful, but you have to find the right therapists. I've always been very lucky in finding the right therapist. I have had a couple of duds, but on the whole, I've been very, very blessed in getting in front of the right people.
Yeah. So you're choosing, in a way, you're choosing, and you're opening to finding who you really need at that particular time. So your life and your experience has been very unique and very, very special, quite rich. You moved through a very challenging experience within your sexuality over the years, from different stages, from the early years of life when you're discovering what turns you on or who do you want to play with, wanting to be tied at 10 and so on, continuing with relationships, up until the moment when you realize in that relationship with Tomo, what was the dynamic about? What is this actually, more than the act of whatever we do here? What is happening with us? I wonder why you decided to write the book, the memoir book, EXODAI, and what is its core message? What do you want to tell people that might be interested in learning about this?
Thank you. It's a great question. So why did I decide to write the book? All through my life, I've kept diaries. I used to pencil write diaries, and then probably for the last 15 years, I've typed diaries into the computer. Whatever was going on in my life, I typed a big diary about the reality TV show when I was on that. I typed a diary and sort of turned it into a book about my first startup entrepreneur experience back in 2005. And writing the diary, I was in a very stressful situation back then, and writing the diary was my therapy, my day-to-day therapy, because stuff would happen in the office and it was all out of control, and I was super stressed, and I'd go and write this diary, which had a cathartic effect on me. And when I finished, that was a film magazine I tried to launch back in 2004. When that whole episode finished, and that was also a 2-year period, I turned the diary into a book. I never published it, but I had a few friends read it. And I've always been a writer, and it turns out this was the story. This relationship with Tomo turned out to be the story that I would publish. Originally, it was just going to be the story of Tomo, but it went through various sea changes, and eventually it became the whole story of my sexuality, from why I didn't love myself, that starting through the relationships and ending with how I learned to love myself. But why did I actually decide to write it? A thing happened when I was in 2012. I was still living in Dubai. I lived in Dubai for 5 years. And in 2012, I had met Tomo because I had visited Tokyo a couple of times. And our relationship had started, and I knew we were having a relationship. And I was trying to move back to Tokyo, probably 60% because of her, 40% because I wanted to move back to the Far East anyway. And during that time, I was really putting it out there to God and the universe. What is my purpose? What is my purpose? I even went to the Holy Land, obviously very close to Dubai, so really convenient. I went on a 10-day trip to the Holy Land with my church, with a very, very spiritual group of people, and I spent virtually every day in different churches praying to God to reveal my purpose. And during that year, 2012, 3 things happened. One is I inherited some money so that I could relocate to Tokyo. 2, I was actually, when I was contemplating walking across the beach in Dubai, should I move back to Tokyo or should I go somewhere like Hong Kong or Singapore? I was definitely going to go back to the Far East. And I was walking along the beach shore, and somebody had written Tokyo in the sand, and I just stumbled across the word Tokyo written in shells. Why anybody would write Tokyo on a beach in Dubai? Anyway, it was a sort of massive flurry from the angels telling me where I should go. But the third thing, which is really the motivation for the book, was that in, I think, November or December of 2012, I used to read the Bible maybe once or twice a week, and I would have a little homily handbook alongside. And on this particular occasion, I just read the Bible, and again, I was very open. What is my mission? What should I be doing? And the Bible passage, I think it was the story of Joshua, who gets swallowed by the whale. And anyway, somebody in the Bible, a character in the Bible who went through immense suffering. And then this homily talks about why we sometimes have to go through suffering, meaning in the biblical character's case, it was so that he could go and help people by talking about his suffering. And maybe you will go through a lot of suffering so that you can write and tell people and help people by relating your story. And it was like, that's your mission.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, it was just, gosh. And I knew that it was talking about my relationship with Tomo, and that I was going to go through a lot of suffering, but that I would come out the other side, and that I would write about that relationship and it would help people. So that was that was the motivation. And I was just already writing, and I just carried on, and there was so much energy behind my writing. I tend to type on the computer quicker than I can read. So I'd type away, and I'd have these experiences. I'd go out with her for a day, and all these things would happen. I would get home at night, and before I went to bed, flipped open the computer, typed about 1,000 words, just banged it all out, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and then edited it, and that's that was really one of the motivations. And I just felt if I can write a book that helps people, then that's really meaningful. That gives my life sort of quite a lot of purpose. And then now that I've written the book, and more it's sort of morphed into what it is in the current day, I realize that it's a story. It's like a cautionary tale. This is what happens if you don't love yourself. This is the kind of toxicity. This is the kind of dysfunctional relationship you can get into. And yet there's hope, because if you apply love and forgiveness, you can come out the other side. So there's a message in there of hope. But there's also, for me, what's most important for me, the mission of this book, is that if there's somebody out there who's suffering, who's in a very dark place, and they're in a dysfunctional relationship of some way, shape, or form, and they're in denial, and they don't understand why their life is so miserable. And somehow they get hold of my book and they read my book and they say, aha, this delusion, this self-sabotage, this I am convincing myself to stay in this relationship because I believe I'm going to help my partner. This is exactly what happened to this woman. And if my book motivates that person in a dysfunctional relationship to recognize that they have the problem is internal, they have an internal disconnect, and the problem is not external. When they realize, if they realize that through reading my book and then take steps to solve that, then I will be thrilled. That would be a triumph. That means that my book has a real purpose, and it, in many ways, it gives all the suffering that I went through, meaning. And reminds me of a story that I read, which is, it's quite interesting. So many people go through so much torturous suffering. And here's the thing I heard from some Syrian refugees, and it's very powerful. And I'm very blessed. If my suffering can give help, then all of the suffering I went through it's effortless because it's helping people. If you can give your suffering meaning, it's wonderful. It's bliss. These Syrian refugees, they were tortured, they were battered, they were abused, they were separated from their families, all for the cause of the rebellion. And they all said, if we had made it, if we had overturned the regime and brought about a new republic, all of our suffering would be for a greater purpose. So it doesn't matter. But because we didn't achieve our goal, the suffering feels terrible. And I just thought, well, how wonderful for anybody if they go through suffering, if they can find meaning and purpose out of their suffering. So I feel very blessed in that regard. And if my book goes on to help people, properly help people move forward in their spiritual journey, in their life, in their self-acceptance and self-love and self-development, then it'll be really wonderful for me. So that's sort of the mission of my book, if you will.
Yes, it's a beautiful mission. I feel that your journey was a positive experience, despite the fact that there were bumps here and there, because you're growing within yourself a sense of understanding and acceptance of what happened to you, to your circumstances, sense of surrendering to what is and what cannot be changed. When you talk about how you dreamt of being able to change your Tomo, help, and then you realize that you can only help yourself, and as a result of that, you started to maybe turn your lenses onto yourself, and you connect with that source of self-love and learn lessons about yourself and extract meaning from that pain. It's a positive story. I would imagine that you suffered a lot and it's been hard for you, but to have the openness and the kindness and the generosity to share the message with all of us, just hoping that one person might receive the message when it's hard for them, in the same way you receive the message about Tokyo on the beach, or the message from the person having an interview on the TV talking about self-empowerment, really. I think it's worthwhile. And I want to thank you so much for doing it and allowing your voice to be heard, allowing your lessons to be shared. I wish we could talk more. I still had a good number of questions, very important, very relevant, but we're going to have to close soon. Towards the end, Elizabeth, what are your best 3 teachings for everyone, but maybe for people that are into the BDSM world or struggle with their sexuality, and generally everyone that would listen and watch this? What are your best 3 teachings to live a happy and fulfilling life?
Well, without a doubt, number one is to learn to love yourself. And be at one with yourself. Be absolutely who you are. Don't let anybody tell you what you aren't. And for many people, it's hard because your barriers are already up through life experience, and through what people have gaslighted you to believe. But it's the most important thing. Learning, seek yourself and learn to love yourself. And then all these other things will flow. That's the sort of first thing. And like I said at the beginning, I'm not 100% there either. So we do have to do other things to keep happy. I think the other 2 points I'd make is one, as much as possible, live your life with a heart of gratitude. And if you're not accustomed to doing that, then practice living your life moment to moment with a heart of gratitude. Be grateful we can communicate through this medium. Grateful that I was able to walk home today. Grateful that I have a day job. Grateful that the sun was shining. Just every day until it becomes a habit. And then I also think the third thing I would say is being in the moment. Now, I'm really bad at this. I'm always thinking about X, talking about Y, looking at Z. If you're in the moment, really properly in the moment, nothing else matters. And to get into the moment, for me, I've been there on occasions. It takes quite a lot of discipline for me to get into the moment. Typically, I would have to be meditating on a regular basis, which I do sometimes, not enough, but I do sometimes. Today, I was a little bit in the moment at my yoga class. I do Bikram yoga, which is the hot yoga. And I often get into the moment then. But it's always fleeting for me. I'd like to be in the moment consistently. The 2 times, or one time in particular, I remember I was in the moment was when I actually did a raw foods diet for 10 days. I was doing some yoga breathing exercises. This was when I was living in Dubai. It was an Indian guru who had this program. And I was so in the moment by the time I gave up coffee, which was quite hard for me, just for those 10 days. For me to be properly in the moment, a lot of the time it's to do with my diet and what I'm eating and what I'm doing and exercise. So those are my 3. Learn to love yourself, live with your life with a heart of gratitude, and try as much as possible to be in the moment and take whatever measures or activities you need to do to get into the moment and be in the moment, and nothing else matters.
They are beautiful, Elizabeth. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely universal. Love yourself, embrace gratitude, and be present in the here and now. I think if we can only remember to connect with these truths within us once a day, and our lives would be a little bit more enlightened and happier. Thank you so much for your time, for your openness, for sharing yourself with us, for your authenticity, for your wisdom, for writing the book EXODAI. Maybe you can show it again, and maybe tell our watchers and listeners.
Can you see that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
It's available on Amazon exclusively.
Yes.
So I'm sorry if you're not an Amazon fan, but that's the only way to get it.
Everyone is an Amazon.
Unless I send it to you directly. So Amazon, and it's all in all the Amazon markets, main markets, including India, and Mexico, as well as the obvious markets. And if you type in EXODAI Hendrick, it should show up. It doesn't come up very much on search because I haven't sold 1 million copies yet. Not quite a long way off. I'm about 999,900 away from that. Anyway, it's on Amazon, but you can also go to my website, which is just a landing page telling you a bit about the book. And there's a big orange button that sends you straight to the Amazon page. And my website is www.exodai.co.uk. So www.exodai, EXODAI.co.uk. Incidentally, the meaning of the word EXODAI is revealed in the book. It's a beautiful story. So do go check it out. I must tell you that there are trigger warnings in the book. It deals with suicide. It deals with real life sadistic BDSM torture, and it's not for the faint-hearted. So go in with an open mind and just maybe read some of the reviews before you jump in as well.
Thank you so much for sharing where people can find out a bit more about you and where they can order the book, and letting them know about the information that they may want to know before starting reading it. I'm going to order it myself and start reading it soon. I'm very excited to really learn more about your story. Thank you for everything, Elizabeth. It's been fantastic to be here in this space with you. I wish we could talk a bit more, but maybe we'll do it again. All the best. Many thanks from me and all of the others that will benefit from this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nicoleta. This has been really wonderful, and you've asked some great questions, and I feel very honored to be on your show. So thank you so much.